Windows 95, the operating system that introduced the Start button, enabled its users to easily access the internet, and arguably was the operating system with a personality. Be it Start Me Up, the iconic Rolling Stones song used in Microsoft's massive advertisement campaign, or popular actors Matthew Perry and Jennifer Aniston from the sitcom Friends looking for Bill Gates about a role in a video guide to Windows 95.
This is Jennifer Aniston. I'm Matthew Perry. We're here to see Mr. Bill Gates about a possible starring role in the video guide to Microsoft Windows 95.
Whatever it was, Windows 95 was a big hit and sold over 40 million copies in its first year of availability, making it, until that time, the largest selling version of Windows ever. Windows 95 was mainly distributed on CD-ROM. You may have seen my video where I installed Windows 95 on a 386 with 40 MHz and 32 MB of memory. In that video, I actually installed an OEM version of Windows 95 from CD. I am not sure how many 386 systems were upgraded with a CD-ROM drive back in the day, but most likely the number was very small. So what if you want to keep your old 386 retro PC as authentic as possible, without an optical drive attached? If all you have available is a floppy drive, then you're in luck. Microsoft released Windows 95 on 13 floppy disks for users not owning an optical drive. Later versions of Windows 95 required more than 20 floppy disks. Of course, you could copy the installation files to your hard disk and start the installation from there, and that is probably the preferred way if you just want to get Windows installed. But for the purpose of this video, we will focus on the floppy disk edition of Windows 95. These days, it is quite difficult to get your hands on a set of original Microsoft Windows 95 floppy disks in working condition, but you can find disk images online, ready for you to copy to physical floppy disks. The floppy disk bundle usually comes with a boot disk to start your PC, and then you get the Windows installation disks. But there is something odd here. You may have already noticed that the boot disk as well as the first installation disk images are smaller in size compared to the rest. Disk 1 requires 1,474,560 bytes of space. This is the regular size of a standard floppy disk, IBM or DOS formatted. The rest of the images take up more space. 1,720,320 bytes to be precise. What is going on here? Did Microsoft use special non-standard floppy disks? The short answer is no. Microsoft used standard 3.5-inch floppy disks. If you're interested in the long answer, then I recommend watching this video to the end. We all have seen floppy disks being advertised having 1.44 megabytes of available space. Using this marketing formula, Microsoft managed to increase the size of their Windows 95 installation disks to 1.68 megabytes. We are talking about an additional 245,760 bytes that are written to a standard floppy disk, reducing the total required floppy disks for Windows 95 from 15 to 13 disks. This was not only a good way to cut cost, it also prevents a simple disk copy, as we will see later. So, how did Microsoft store more data on standard floppy disks? To answer that question, we should have a quick look at the structure of a floppy disk. A flexible magnetic disk is enclosed in a plastic housing covered in fabric to remove dust particles. In its basic, unformatted form, a floppy disk can actually store around 2 megabytes of data. When a floppy disk is formatted using a tool like the MS-DOS program Format, information about its layout is stored on the floppy disk and thereby reducing its total usable space. This includes physical characteristics like number of tracks, sectors, and gaps between sectors, but also logical information for the file allocation table, boot sector, root directory, and clusters. When a high-density, double-sided floppy disk is formatted, it ends up with 80 tracks and 18 sectors per track. Each sector holds 512 bytes of data. With this information, we can actually calculate the size of a formatted, IBM-compatible floppy disk. 80 tracks times 18 sectors times 512 bytes times 2 sides. This is a total of 1,474,560 bytes. The tool I'm using in this video is FDFormat from Christoph H. Hochstetter. It provides a lot more information than the regular format tool included in DOS, and, as we will see, has a lot more features. Here we can see that on top of the lost space due to the physical alignment of tracks and sectors, 33 sectors are used to store file system information. 512 bytes are dedicated to the boot sector, which is a single sector on the disk. 7,168 bytes are used for the root directory, another 14 sectors. And finally, 9216 bytes or 18 sectors are used for the file allocation table. From the total 2880 sectors, only 2847 sectors are available to the user, or 1,457,664 bytes of usable space. An image file of a diskette has the information of boot sector, root directory, and file allocation table included. Therefore, it has the full size of a 2880 sector disk, or 1,474,560 bytes. As we have seen before, the first diskette of the Windows 95 installation set has a size of a 2880 sector disk. Therefore, there is no issue writing this image to a regular IBM compatible floppy disk. The tool to write images is part of the FDFormat collection. A link to an archive with all the applications I'm using is in the video description. The Write Image tool provides a few additional details. After a bit about the author, you can see information extracted from the floppy disk. We have 80 tracks, 18 sectors per track, and 2 sides. Identical information is displayed below, but this time it refers to the floppy image. The tool finalizes its work without any success message. You're just back at the MS-DOS input prompt. Now let's try to write diskette number 2 of the Windows 95 installation set. The tool quits immediately with an error message. Source file and destination disk have different formats. Nothing has changed from the information extracted from the floppy disk. This is no surprise as I'm using the same disk I used to write diskette number 1. So let's examine the information of the image file. We still have 80 tracks and 2 sides, but this image file has 21 sectors per track. That is 3 sectors or 1536 bytes additional space per track. To calculate the total extra space we get using such a format, we multiply 3 sectors times 80 tracks times 512 bytes times 2 sides. And this will give us 245,760 bytes. We have seen this number before. This is the extra space an image file from the Windows 95 installation set requires. And this is how Microsoft stored more data on a standard floppy disk, by increasing the sector count per track from 18 to 21. But how is this possible? Let's have a look at the Format tool that comes with MS-DOS. The help screen does actually have the commands listed that should allow us to specify tracks per side and sectors per track. Well, that is super convenient. Let's try it out. Format T80 for 80 tracks and N21 for 21 sectors per track. And no. Format tells us that our floppy drive does not support the given parameters. What a lie! See, when Microsoft released Windows 95 on those floppy disks with more space, it not only saved them 2 disks, it also made it a lot more difficult to copy them, acting like a copy protection. It wouldn't be wise for Microsoft to ship the tools that can be used to bypass their pseudo copy protection. There were tools, however, that could format floppy disks with 21 sectors per track. This format is also known as DMF, or Distribution Media Format. Microsoft used this format for many other distributions like Word and Excel for Windows 95, and there is even a Windows 98 First Edition floppy version. One more thing to note is that DMF floppies could also be created using Macs. So it isn't a Microsoft thing. Now I'm switching to the tool FDFormat. Same as the MS-DOS tool Format, it allows to specify how many tracks and sectors the floppy disk should have. It also offers many additional options which I will get to in a moment. But first, let's try to format a disk with 80 tracks and 21 sectors per track. The syntax of this command is FDFormat, drive A, T80 for 80 tracks, and N21 for 21 sectors per track. When you open the help file provided with FDFormat, you will also find a list of handy shortcuts that make it easier to create floppy disks in DMF format. Instead of specifying the tracks and sectors, you can simply specify F168 as a parameter. This is the same as formatting the disk with 80 tracks and 21 sectors per track. While the tool is formatting, we get more information about the floppy, most of which can be controlled with extra parameters. We have a double-sided floppy disk, which is implied here by mentioning 2 heads, 80 tracks per side and 21 sectors per track. I don't know much about Interleave and what this exactly does, but I noticed that an interleave of 1 is twice as fast as the current setting of 2. More about this later. Gap length specifies the area left blank between sectors. Furthermore, we can see that we can have 224 entries in the root directory. This means that you can have 224 files or folders on drive A in the root directory. We can also see that a cluster contains one sector of 512 bytes, the standard size of a sector on a floppy disk. I will not get into sector shift in this video, because I was not able to notice an increase in performance, which this feature should make possible. Here is the explanation from the README file that shipped with FDFormat. You can pause the video and read it if you're interested. My assumption is that at some point, formatting utilities employed sector shift as a standard method when formatting floppy disks. Once the format is complete, we get a summary. Instead of 2,880 sectors, we now have 3,360 sectors on the same floppy disk. 480 sectors more. All because we got 3 extra sectors per track when we went from the standard 18 to 21 sectors. If I understand correctly, then clusters contain the sectors that can be used by the user. We have 35 less clusters available than number of sectors. Remember that in our case, a cluster contains only one sector. Therefore, we get 3,325 clusters available to the user. In the summary below, we see the total bytes of the floppy disk. 1,720,320. We have seen this number before. It is the size of our installation diskette number 2 of Windows 95. The boot sector occupies only one sector. Then we have 14 sectors for the root directory and 20 sectors are used for the file allocation table. 2 sectors more compared to a regular floppy disk. Those 2 extra sectors are probably required to manage the extra space that is now available on the disk. The usable space of this floppy disk is 1,702,400 bytes. Let's try to write diskette number 2 of Windows 95 to the floppy disk with 21 sectors per track. As you can see, the image writer no longer complains about the source image and the destination disk having different formats. Let's write another image to the floppy. Let's write diskette number 3 as well, just to be sure that we have found the format Microsoft was using to ship Windows 95 on floppy disks. The image also seems to be written without complaints. Let's have a look at the files that were written to the floppy disk. Okay, there is only one file and it uses up the entire space of the disk. Wait a second. Have a look at the space of this disk. When we formatted the disk with 80 tracks and 21 sectors per track, the maximum usable capacity was 1,702,400 bytes. It looks like we have not yet discovered the correct setting how Microsoft formatted the disks. So far, we have only changed the physical characteristics of the floppy disk by increasing the sector count per track from 18 to 21. There are, however, a few ways to optimize the logical parameters of the diskette. If you know, for instance, that you will only store large files or a limited number of files on the floppy disk, you can optimize it accordingly. Let's start by changing the cluster size to 2 sectors per cluster. This is only advised if you store larger files on the disk, as any unused space of a cluster is wasted. For instance, if you store a file of size 412 bytes on a disk with a cluster size of 2 sectors, 612 bytes are wasted and cannot be used for other files. In case a cluster is made of one sector, you would waste 100 bytes only, so it really depends on your use case. With a cluster size of 2, the number of sectors required for the file allocation table drops from 20 sectors to only 10 sectors. Unfortunately, we lose 1 sector to the root directory, which increases from 14 to 15 sectors. That may be due to the requirement to have an even number of sectors to satisfy 2 sectors per cluster. This leaves us with 9 additional sectors, which will be available to the user for a total of 3,334 sectors. Since a cluster is made of 2 sectors, the total number of clusters is 1,667. Now the floppy disk has a capacity of 1,707,008 bytes available for data. We are still missing 18 sectors, or 9,216 bytes. We can optimize a little further if we restrict the number of files and folders that can be written to the root directory of the disk. With the parameter D16, we tell the tool to format the disk, allowing a maximum of 16 entries in the root directory. That literally does what it says. You won't be able to have more than 16 files or folders in the root directory. Now only one sector is used for the root directory, down from 15 sectors before. We freed another 14 sectors which are added to the total capacity of the floppy disk. Now the disk has a capacity of 1,714,176 bytes available for data. We are really close to the format Microsoft used. 4 sectors are still missing. We just need to find another 2048 bytes. But before we go look for the missing bytes, let me show you what happens when you want to add more than 16 entries into the root directory. I already created 16 entries, and this is the 17th folder I tried to create. Yeah, the file system ran out of space. Okay, back to the missing 4 sectors. The boot sector and the root directory are already at 1. There is nothing else we can do here. But maybe we can reduce the file allocation table size. We have already seen a drop to half the amount when we went from 1 to 2 sectors per cluster. We may get to Microsoft's format if we increase the sectors per cluster to 4. Let's try that now and see what we get on the summary screen. 1,716,224 bytes available. Looks like we finally found the parameters Microsoft used to create their floppy disks for Windows 95. And indeed, the sectors used for the file allocation table have reduced by 4 sectors to 6 in total, and the freed sectors are available to the user for storing data. Increasing the cluster size does not free up a lot of space, therefore I would stay at a maximum of 2 sectors per cluster. FDFormat even warns us that DOS only supports a cluster size of 1 or 2. I couldn't verify this, but it may be that older versions of DOS are not able to read floppy disks with a cluster having more than 2 sectors. But we are not done yet. We can squeeze a few more bytes from the floppy disk by overformatting it to 82 tracks. Unlike increasing the number of sectors from 18 to 21 per track, adding 2 additional tracks per site is not recommended and should not be used if you store important data on floppy disks. But who does this these days anyways? Well, Boeing does. It uses floppy disks to update software on their 747 airplanes. The 2 additional tracks are placed on an area that usually is not supposed to hold data, and there is no guarantee that it will work. I don't know where those extra tracks are located, but we are drifting further away from the standard, which may make this floppy disk less compatible with hardware and software. Any information that is stored on those extra tracks may not be recoverable, and in the worst case can render the floppy disk unusable under DOS or Windows. It probably is a good idea to let ScanDisk test the surface of the floppy disk. A surface test can determine a floppy disk's fault-free operation, but it is still no guarantee that this disk will work for an extended time. And there may be more issues waiting. Not all floppy drives support 82 tracks. The only way to know for sure is to try your luck with your own floppy drive. I have 2 floppy drives which I tested. One is from Mitsumi and the other one is from TIAC. Both drives had no issues formatting a floppy disk with 82 tracks per side. The Mitsumi drive has a large exposed rotating disk which makes it difficult to place on a surface. The TIAC on the other hand has its moving parts completely concealed within the housing. With 82 tracks per side, we added a total of 4 tracks with 21 sectors each. That means that we should get an additional 84 sectors or 43,008 bytes extra space. The boot sector and the root directory remain at 1 sector each, but the file allocation table increased now from 5,120 bytes or 10 sectors to 6,144 bytes or 12 sectors. This floppy disk has a usable capacity of 1,756,160 bytes. By the way, 82 tracks and 21 sectors was the absolute maximum I could set. Any larger number would cause the disk to fail. Here is a summary of all configurations that we have seen in this video so far. With changing the format, we can get 298,496 bytes of additional space on a regular floppy disk. That is about 20% extra space. The final topic I want to discuss is Interleave. In this video you may have seen a value of 1 or 2 for this property. All I can say is that the larger the number, the slower the transfer speed of the floppy disk. With an interleave of 1, the disk transfer score is around 60 or higher in this benchmark. With an interleave of 2, we drop to around 30, or half the speed. Interleave is selected automatically by the formatting tool, and I believe it is a physical constraint depending on other parameters like sectors per track and gap length. You cannot force a DMF installation disk of Windows 95 to use an interleave value of 1. The disk simply is not accessible when this setting is used. That would also imply that the Windows 95 setup is slower using the DMF format, compared to using a regular floppy disk formatted to be IBM or DOS compatible with around 1.4 megabytes. Yes, you would need 2 more disks, but based on the benchmark results, they would transfer data twice as fast and probably speed up a Windows 95 installation. You can even hear the difference in access speed between Interleave 1 and 2 when used on the same floppy disk. The largest size I could manage to create while keeping the disk at its peak performance was to use the following parameters: 82 tracks, 20 sectors per track, 16 root entries and 2 sectors per cluster. With this configuration, we have 3268 sectors and 1634 clusters available. The total size of the floppy is 1,673,216 bytes, or, using the marketing formula to determine its size, 1.64 megabytes. I am curious how it would be to install Windows 95 from 13 floppy disks. Just as a comparison in size, the 13 floppy disks have a total size of 21 megabytes. The Windows 95 CD image has almost 360 megabytes. That is 17 times the size of the floppy images. I wonder how much was cut in the floppy version. If you know, let me know in the comments. And if you want me to make a video about it, let me know too. And we have reached the end of this very long video. I hope you enjoyed the content, even though there was quite a bit of math here and there. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already done so. And press the bell icon so you won't miss any of my upcoming videos in the future. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in one of my other videos.